Hello friends, welcome to Premier UPSC Ias. So continuing with the Polity lecture series pertaining to prelims examination. Today we are going to start with center-state relationships. Introduction. The Constitution of India, being federal in structure, divides the following three powers between the center and the states: legislative, executive, and financial. However, there is no division of judicial power as the Constitution has established an integrated judicial system to enforce both the central laws as well as state laws. The Constitution contains elaborate provisions to regulate the various dimensions of the relations between the center and the states. Part 9 and Part 12. Part 9 deals with relations between the Union and the states, in which it deals with legislative relations, Article 245 to Article 255, and administrative relations from Article 256 to Article 263. And in Part 12, finance, property, contracts, and suits are discussed. Distribution of revenues between the Union and the states, Article 268 to Article 281. Miscellaneous financial provisions from Article 282 to Article 291, and borrowing in Article 292 and Article 293. Let's see legislative relations, Article 245 to Article 255. Article 245. Extent of laws made by Parliament and by the legislatures of states. 246. Subject matter of laws made by Parliament and by the legislatures of states. Article 246A. Special provision with respect to goods and services tax (GST) added by 101 Amendment Act 2016. Article 247. Power of Parliament to provide for the establishment of certain additional courts. Article 248. Residuary powers of legislation. Article 249. Power of Parliament to legislate with respect to a matter in the state list in the national interest. Article 250. Power of Parliament to legislate with respect to any matter in the state list if a proclamation of emergency is in operation. Article 251. Inconsistency between laws made by Parliament under Article 249 and Article 250 and laws made by the legislatures of states. Article 252. Power of Parliament to legislate for two or more states by consent and adoption of such legislation by any other state. Article 253. Legislation for giving effect to international agreements. Article 254. Inconsistency between laws made by the Parliament and the laws made by the legislatures of states. Article 255. Requirements as to recommendations and previous sanctions to be regarded as matters of procedure only. Besides these, there are other subject articles dealing with the same subject, Article 352, 356, etc. Four aspects of legislative relations. Indian Constitution divides the legislative powers between the center and the state with respect to both the territory and the subjects of legislation, which can be seen in other federal constitutions too. There are four aspects in the center-state legislative relations, namely territorial extent of central and state legislation, distribution of legislative subjects, parliamentary legislation in the state field, and center's control over state legislation. 1. Territorial extent of central and state legislation. Article 245. The Parliament can make laws for the whole or any part of the territory of India. A state legislature can make laws for the whole or any part of the state. The laws made by a state legislature are not applicable outside the state, except when there is a sufficient nexus between the state and the object. The laws of the Parliament are also applicable to the Indian citizens and their property in any part of the world. However, the Constitution places certain restrictions on the plenary territorial jurisdiction of the Parliament. In other words, laws of the Parliament are not applicable in the following areas. 1. The President can make regulations for the peace, progress, and good government of the four Union territories: Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Lakshadweep, Dadra and Nagar Haveli, and Daman and Diu. A regulation so made has the same force and effect as an act of parliament. It may also repeal or amend any act of parliament in relation to these union territories. 2. The governor is empowered to direct that an act of parliament does not apply to a scheduled area in the state or apply with specified modifications and exceptions. The governor of Assam may likewise direct that an act of parliament does not apply to a tribal area, autonomous district in the state or apply with specified modifications and exceptions. The president enjoys the same power with respect to tribal areas, autonomous districts in Meghalaya, Tripura, and Mizoram. 2. Distribution of legislative subjects. Article 246. The Constitution provides for a threefold distribution of legislative subjects between the center and the states in the seventh schedule, namely List 1, the Union List, List 2, the State List, and List 3, the Concurrent List. The Parliament has exclusive powers to make laws with respect to any of the matters enumerated in the Union List. The state legislatures has, in normal circumstances, exclusive powers to make laws with respect to any of the matters enumerated in the state list. Both the parliament and the state legislature can make laws with respect to any of the matters enumerated in the concurrent list. The 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 transferred five subjects to the concurrent list from the state list, that is, education, forests, weights and measures, protection of wild animals and birds, and administration of justice, constitution and organization of all courts except the Supreme Court and the High Courts. Article 246A. Special provision with respect to goods and services tax (GST) has been inserted by the Constitution 101st Amendment Act 2016. Accordingly, Parliament and the legislature of every state have power to make laws with respect to goods and services tax (GST) imposed by the Union or by such state. However, Parliament has exclusive power to make laws with respect to goods and services tax where the supply of goods or of services or both takes place in the course of interstate trade or commerce. Article 248. Subject to the Article 246A, Parliament has exclusive power to make any law with respect to any matter not enumerated in the concurrent list or state list. Such power shall include the power of making any law imposing a tax not mentioned in either of those lists. Overlapping or conflict among the list. The Constitution expressly secures the predominance of the Union list over the state list and the concurrent list, and that of the concurrent list over the state list. Thus, in case of overlapping or conflict between the Union list and the state list, the former, that is, Union should list should prevail. Between the Union list and the concurrent list, it is again the former, that is, the Union list, which should prevail. Between the concurrent list and the state list, it is again the former, that is, the concurrent list should prevail. Dominance of central laws. Article 254. In case of a conflict between the central law and the state law on a subject enumerated in the concurrent list, the central law prevails over the state law. But there is an exception. If the state law has been reserved for the consideration of the president and has received his assent, then the state law prevails in that state. But it would still be competent for the parliament to override such a law by subsequently making a law on the same matter. Parliamentary legislation in the state field. The earlier discussed scheme of distribution of legislative powers between the center and the states is to be maintained in normal times, but in abnormal times, the scheme of distribution is either modified or suspended. In other words, the Constitution empowers the Parliament to make laws on any matter enumerated in the state list under the following five extraordinary circumstances. 1. When Rajya Sabha passes a resolution under Article 249. 2. During a national emergency under Article 250 and 352. 3. When states make a request under Article 252. 4. To implement international agreements under Article 253. And 5. During President's rule under Article 356. Article 249. If the Rajya Sabha declares that it is necessary in the national interest that Parliament should make laws on a matter in the state list, then the Parliament becomes competent to make laws on that matter. Such a resolution must be supported by two-thirds of the members of present and voting. The resolution remains in force for 1 year. It can be renewed any number of times, but not exceeding 1 year at a time. The laws cease to have effect on the expiration of 6 months after the resolution has ceased to be in force. This provision does not restrict the power of the legislature to make laws on the same matter. Article 250. The Parliament acquires the power to legislate with respect to matters in the state list while a proclamation of national emergency is in operation. The laws become inoperative on the expiration of 6 months after the emergency has ceased to operate. Other articles related to emergency provisions, Articles 352 and 356, and division of legislative powers as well, will be discussed in the session dedicated to emergency. Article 252. When the legislatures of two or more states pass resolutions requesting the Parliament to enact laws on a matter in the state list, then the Parliament can make laws for regulating that matter. A law so enacted applies only to those states which have passed the resolutions. However, any other state may adopt it afterwards by passing a resolution to that effect in its legislature. Such a law can be amended or repealed only by the Parliament and not by the legislatures of the concerned states. The effect of passing a resolution under the above provision is that the Parliament becomes entitled to legislate with respect to a matter for which it has no power to make a law. On the other hand, the state legislature ceases to have the power to make a law with respect to that matter. The resolution operates as abdication or surrender of the power of the state legislature with respect to that matter, and it is placed entirely in the hands of Parliament, which alone can then legislate with respect to it. For example, Wildlife Protection Act 1972, Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974, Urban Land Sealing and Regulation Act 1976, Transplantation of Human Organs Act 1994, etc. Article 253. The Parliament can make laws on any matter in the state list for implementing the international treaties, agreements, or conventions. This provision enables the central government to fulfill its international obligations and commitments. For example, United Nations Privileges and Immunities Act 1947, Geneva Convention Act 1960, Anti-Hijacking Act 1982, legislations relating to environment and the TRIPS, etc. Centers control over state legislation. Article 255. The Constitution empowers the state to exercise control over states' legislative matters that required recommendations and previous sanctions in the following ways. 1. The governor can reserve certain types of bills passed by the state legislature for the consideration of the president. The president enjoys absolute veto over them. 2. Bills on certain matters enumerated in the state list can be introduced in the state legislature only with the previous sanction of the president. For example, the bills imposing restrictions on the freedom of trade and commerce. 3. The president can direct the states to reserve money bills and other financial bills passed by the state legislature for his consideration during a financial emergency. Article 360. Administrative Relations, Article 256 to Article 263. Article 256. Obligation of states and the Union. Article 257. Control of the Union over states in certain cases. Article 258. Power of the Union to confer powers, etc., on states in certain cases. 258A. Power of the states to entrust functions to the Union. 259. Repealed by the CEA 1956. Article 260. Jurisdiction of the Union in relation to territories outside India. 261. Public Acts, Records and Judicial Proceedings. 262. Adjudication of disputes relating to waters of interstate rivers or river valleys. Article 263, provisions with respect to an interstate council. Also, there are many other articles pertaining to the administrative relations between the state and the state center. Article 312, 339, 350A, 356, and 365. Distribution of executive powers. Except in few cases, the executive power has been divided between the center and the states based on the lines of distribution of the legislative powers. Thus, the executive power of the Union extends to the whole of the India in the following manner: to the matters on which the Parliament has exclusive power of legislation, that is, the subjects enumerated in the Union list, and two, to the exercise of rights, authority, and jurisdiction conferred on it by any treaty or agreement. Similarly, the executive power of a state extends to its territory in respect of the subjects enumerated in the state list, on which the state legislature has exclusive power of legislation. In respect of the subjects enumerated in the concurrent list, the executive power rests with the state. However, it is not the case when a constitutional provision or a law by the parliament specifically confers it on the center. Therefore, even though parliament enacts a law on a concurrent subject, it is to be executed by the states except when the constitution or the parliament has directed otherwise. Obligation of states and the center. Article 256. The Constitution has placed two restrictions on the executive power of the states in order to give ample scope to the center for exercising its executive power in an unrestricted manner. Thus, the executive power of every state is to be exercised in such a way: 1. As to ensure compliance with the laws made by the Parliament and any existing law which apply in the states, and 2. As not to impede or prejudice the exercise of executive power of the centre in the state. In both the cases, the executive power of the center extends to giving of such directions to the state as are necessary for the purpose. The sanction behind these directions of the center is coercive in nature under Article 365. Article 365. It states that where any state has failed to comply with or to give effect to any directions given by the center, it will be lawful for the president to hold that a situation has arisen in which the government of the state cannot be carried on in accordance with the provisions of the constitution. It means that in such a situation, the president's rule can be imposed in the state under Article 356. Control of the Union over states. Article 257. In addition to the two cases in Article 256, the Centre is empowered to give directions to the states with regard to the exercise of their executive power in the following matters. 1. The construction and maintenance of means of communication declared to be of national or military importance by the state. 2. The measures to be taken for the protection of the railways within the state, provided that nothing in this clause 1 shall be taken as restricting the power of Parliament to declare highways or waterways to be national highways or national waterways, or the power of the Union with respect to the highways or waterways so declared, or the power of the Union to construct and maintain means of communication as part of its functions with respect to naval, military, and air force works. The coercive sanction behind the central directions under Article 365 is also applicable in these cases, where in carrying out any direction given to a state under this article as to the construction or maintenance of any means of communication and measures to be taken for the protection of any railway, costs have been incurred in excess of those which would have been incurred in the discharge of the normal duties of the state if such direction had not been given. There shall be paid by the Government of India to the state such sum in respect of the extra costs so incurred by the state, as may be agreed or in default of agreement, as may be determined by an arbitrator appointed by the Chief Justice of India. Article 339A. The executive power of the Union shall extend to the giving of direction to a state as to the drawing up and execution of the specified schemes for the welfare of the scheduled tribes in the state. Article 350A. Constitution, 7th Amendment Act 1956. It shall be the endeavor of every state and of every local authority within the state to provide adequate facilities for instruction in the mother tongue at the primary stage of education to children belonging to linguistic minority groups in the state. The President may issue such a direction as he considers necessary for securing the provision of such facilities. Mutual delegation of functions under Articles 258 and 258A. This mutual delegation of administrative functions may be conditional or unconditional. From the above, it is clear that the mutual delegation of functions between the center and the state can take place either under an agreement or by a legislation. While the center can use both the methods, a state can use only the first, that is, agreement method. Power of the Union to confer powers on states. Article 258. The President may, with the consent of the state government, entrust to that government any of the executive functions of the center. The Constitution also makes a provision for the entrustment of the executive functions of the center to a state without the consent of that state. But in this case, the delegation is by the parliament and not by the president. Thus, a law made by the Parliament on a subject of the Union list can confer powers and impose duties on a state, or authorize the conferring of powers and imposition of duties by the centre upon a state without the consent of the state concerned. Notably, the same thing cannot be done by the state legislature where, by virtue of this article, powers and duties have been conferred or imposed upon a state or officers or authorities thereof, there shall be paid by the government of India to the state such sum in respect of any extra costs of administration incurred by the state to fulfill those powers and duties, as may be agreed or in default of agreement, as may be determined by an arbitrator appointed by the Chief Justice of India. Power of the states to entrust functions to the Union. Article 258A. The governor of a state may, with the consent of the government of India, entrust either conditionally or unconditionally to that government or to its officers functions in relation to any matter to which the executive power of the state extends. Why is mutual delegation of executive functions required? The distribution of the legislative powers between the center and the states is rigid. Consequently, the center cannot delegate its legislative powers to the states, and a single state cannot request the parliament to make a law on a state subject. The distribution of the executive power in general follows the distribution of the legislative powers. But such a rigid division in the executive sphere may lead to occasional conflicts between the two. Hence, the Constitution provides for intergovernment delegation of executive functions, that is, mutual delegation, in order to mitigate rigidity and avoid a situation of deadlock. All India Services. Article 312. Article 312 of the Constitution authorizes the Parliament to create new All India Services on the basis of a Rajya Sabha resolution to that effect. Each of these All India Services, irrespective of their division among different states, form a single service with common rights and status and uniform scales of pay throughout the country. However, the center and the states also have their separate public services called as central services and the state services respectively. In addition, there are All India Services IAS, IPS, and IFS. The members of these services occupy top positions or key posts under both the center and the states and serve them by turns, but they are recruited and trained by the center. These services are controlled jointly by the center and the states. The ultimate control lies with the central government, while the immediate control rests with the state governments. Public Service Commissions. In the field of public service commissions, the center-state relations are as follows. The chairman and members of a state public service commission, though appointed by the governor of the state, can be removed only by the president. The parliament can establish a joint state public service commission for two or more states on the request of the state legislatures concerned. The chairman and the members of the joint state public service commission are appointed by the president. The Union Public Service Commission can serve the needs of a state on the request of the state governor and with the approval of the president. The UPSC assists the states when requested by two or more states in framing and operating schemes of joint recruitment for any services for which candidates possessing special qualifications are required. Integrated judicial system. Though India has a dual polity, there is no dual system of administration of justice. The Constitution, on the other hand, established an integrated judicial system with the Supreme Court at the top and the state high courts below it. This is done to eliminate diversities in the remedial procedure. The judges of a state high court are appointed, transferred, and removed by the president in consultation with the Chief Justice of India and the governor of the state. The parliament can establish a common high court for two or more states. Relations during emergencies. National emergency under Article 352. The center becomes entitled to give executive directions to a state on any matter. Thus, the state governments are brought under the complete control of the center, though they are not suspended. The president's rule under Article 356. The president can assume to himself the functions of the state government and powers vested in the governor or any other executive authority in the state. Financial emergency under Article 316. The center can direct the states to observe canons of financial propriety. The president can give other necessary directions, including the reduction of salaries of persons serving in the state and the high court judges. Other provisions in other parts. The Constitution contains the following other provisions which enable the center to exercise control over the state administration. Article 355 imposes two duties on the center to protect every state against external aggression and internal disturbance, and to ensure that the government of every state is carried on in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. The governor of a state is appointed by the president. He holds office during the pleasure of the president. In addition to the constitutional head of the state, the governor acts as an agent of the center in the state. He submits periodical reports to the center about the administrative affairs of the state. The state election commissioner, though appointed by the governor of the state, can be removed only by the president. Financial relations. Article 268 to 293. Article 268. Duties levied by the Union but collected and appropriated by the states. Article 268. Repealed by 101th Amendment Act 2016. 269. Taxes levied and collected by the Union but assigned to the states. 269A. Levy and collection of goods and services tax in course of interstate trade or commerce by 101 Amendment Act 2016. 217. Taxes levied and distributed between the Union and the states. 271. Surcharge on certain duties and taxes for purposes of the Union. 272. Repealed by 8th Amendment Act 2000. 273. Grants in lieu of export duty on jute and jute products. 274. Prior recommendation of President required to bills affecting taxation in which states are interested. 275. Grants from the Union to certain states. 276. Taxes on professions, trades, callings, and employments. Article 277. Savings. Article 278. Repealed by the 7th Amendment Act 1956. Article 279. Calculation of net proceeds. Article 279A. Goods and Services Tax Council by the 101 Amendment Act 2016. Article 280. Finance Commission. Article 281. Recommendations of the Finance Commission. Article 282. Expenditure defrayable by the Union or a state out of its revenues. Article 283. Custody, etc. of the consolidated funds, contingency funds, and monies credited to the public accounts. Article 284. Custody, etc. of the consolidated funds, contingency funds, and monies credited to the public accounts. Article 285. Exemption of property of the Union from state taxation. Article 286. Restrictions as to imposition of tax on the sale or purchase of goods. Article 287. Exemption from taxes on electricity. Article 288. Exemption from the taxation by states in respect of water or electricity in certain cases. Article 289. Exemption of property and income of a state from union taxation. Article 290. Adjustment in respect of certain expenses and pensions. Article 290A. Annual payment to certain Devaswam funds. Article 291, repealed by 26th Amendment Act 1971. Article 292, borrowing by the Government of India. Article 293, borrowing by states. Allocation of taxing powers. The Constitution divides the taxing powers between the center and the states in the following way. The Parliament has exclusive power to levy taxes on the subjects enumerated in the Union list. The state legislature has exclusive power to levy taxes on the subjects enumerated in the state list. Both the Parliament and the state legislature can levy taxes on subjects enumerated in the concurrent list. The residuary power of taxation is vested in the Parliament. The Constitution also draws a distinction between the power to levy and collect a tax and the power to appropriate the proceeds of a tax so levied and collected. For example, the income tax is levied and collected by the center, but its proceeds are distributed between the center and the states. Restriction on the taxing powers of the states. The state legislature can impose taxes on professions, trades, callings, and employments, but the total amount of such taxes payable by any person should not exceed rupees 2,500 per annum. A state legislature can impose taxes on the sale or purchase of goods other than newspapers, but this power of the states to impose sales tax is subject to the four restrictions. 1. No tax can be imposed on the sale or purchase taking place outside the states. No tax can be imposed on the sale or purchase taking place in the course of import or export. No tax can be imposed on the sale or purchase taking place in the course of interstate trade and commerce. And a tax imposed on the sale or purchase of goods declared by Parliament to be of special importance in interstate trade and commerce is subject to the restrictions and conditions specified by the Parliament. A state legislature can impose tax on the consumption or sale of electricity, but no tax can be imposed on the consumption or sale of electricity which is consumed by the center or sold to the center or consumed in the construction, maintenance, or operation of any railway by the center or by the concerned railway company or sold to the center or the railway company for the same purpose. A state legislature can impose a tax in respect of any water or electricity stored, generated, consumed, distributed, or sold by any authority established by Parliament for regulating or developing any interstate river or river valley. But such a law, to be effective, should be reserved for the President's consideration and receive his assent. Distribution of revenues between the Union and the states. Amendments for the distribution of tax revenues. The following two amendments have introduced major changes in the scheme of the distribution of tax revenues between the center and the states. 80th Amendment of 2000 and 88th Amendment of 2003. The 18th Amendment was enacted to give effect to the recommendations of the 10th Finance Commission. The Commission recommended that out of the total income obtained from certain central taxes and duties, 29% should go to the states. This is known as Alternative Scheme of Devolution and came into effect retrospectively from April 1, 1996. The 88th Amendment Act has added a new Article 268 dealing with service tax. It also added a new subject in the Union list, Entry 92C, Taxes on Services. Service tax is levied by the center but collected and appropriated by both the center and the states. It has been repealed in 2016 by 101 Amendment Act. Article 268. Taxes levied by the center but collected and appropriated by the states. Such stamp duties as are mentioned in the Union list shall be levied by the Government of India but shall be collected in the case where such duties are leviable within any Union territory by the Government of India, and in other cases by the states within which such duties are respectively leviable. The proceeds in any financial year of any such duty leviable within any state shall not form part of the consolidated fund of India but shall be assigned to that state. Article 268. Added by the Constitutional 88th Amendment Act 2003, service tax levied by the center but collected and appropriated by both the center and the states. It is not forced at present as it has been repealed by the Constitution 101st Amendment Act 2016. By the said amendment, GST has been introduced under the Article 246A. Article 269. Taxes levied and collected by the Union but assigned to the states. The following taxes fall under this category: taxes on the sale or purchase of goods other than newspapers in the course of interstate trade or commerce, taxes on the consignment of goods in the course of interstate trade or commerce. The net proceeds of these taxes do not form a part of the Consolidated Fund of India. They are assigned to the concerned states in accordance with the principles laid down by the Parliament. Article 269A, Levy and collection of goods and services tax in course of interstate trade or commerce. Goods and services tax on supplies in the course of interstate trade or commerce shall be levied and collected by the Government of India. Such tax shall be apportioned between the Union and the states in a manner as may be provided by Parliament by law on the recommendations of the Goods and Services Tax Council. Parliament may formulate the principles of for determining the place of supply, and when a supply of goods or services or both takes place in the course of interstate trade or commerce, the amount apportioned to a state shall not form part of the Consolidated Fund of India. Article 270. This category includes all taxes and duties referred to in the Union list except the following: duties and taxes referred to in Article 268, 269, and 269A, surcharge on taxes and duties referred in Article 271, and any cess levied for specific purposes. The manner of distribution of the net proceeds of these taxes and duties is prescribed by the President on the recommendation of the Finance Commission. Article 271. Surcharge on certain duties and taxes for purposes of the Union. Notwithstanding anything in Articles 269 and 270, Parliament may at any time increase any of the duties or taxes referred to in those articles except the goods and services tax under Article 246A by a surcharge for the purposes of the Union. The whole proceeds of any such surcharge shall form part of the Consolidated Fund of India. In other words, the states have no share in these surcharges. Article 274. To protect the interest of states, the following bills can be introduced in the Parliament only on the recommendation of the President. A bill which improves or varies any tax or duty in which states are interested. A bill which varies the meaning of the expression agricultural income as defined for the purposes of the enactments relating to Indian income tax. A bill which affects the principles on which monies are or may be distributable to states, and a bill which imposes any surcharge on any specified tax or duty for the purpose of the center. Article 276. Taxes on professions, trades, callings, and employments. The legislature of a state can make laws relating to the taxes for the benefit of the state or of a municipality, district board, or other local authority therein in respect of professions, trades, callings, or employments. The total amount payable in respect of any one person shall not exceed 2,500 rupees per annum. The power of the legislature of a state to make laws as aforesaid shall not be construed as limiting in any way the power of Parliament to make laws with respect to taxes on income accruing from or arising out of professions, trades, callings, and employments. Article 279. Calculation of net proceeds, etc. The phrase net proceeds means the proceeds of a tax or a duty minus the cost of collection. The net proceeds of a tax or a duty in any area is to be ascertained and certified by the Comptroller and the Auditor General of India. His certificate is final. Net proceeds is equal to proceeds of the tax or duty minus the cost of collection. Article 279A. Provision of the GST Council by the 101 Amendment Act of 2016, the Goods and Services Tax Council shall consist of the following members, namely the Union Minister, Finance Minister, Chairperson, Union Minister of State in charge of Revenue or Finance member, the Minister in charge of Finance or Taxation, or any other minister nominated by each state government members. Articles 280 and 281. Finance Commissions and its recommendations. The President shall, at the expiration of every 5th year or at such earlier time as the President considers necessary, by order constitute a Finance Commission. The Commission shall consist of a chairman and 4 other members to be appointed by the President. Parliament may, by law, determine the qualifications which shall be requisite for appointment as members of the Commission and the manner in which they shall be selected. Grants in aid to the states from the central resources. Three types of grants. There are the following two types of grants in aid provided in the Constitution, namely statutory grants under Article 275, discretionary grants under Article 289. The Constitution also provided for a third type of grants in aid, but for a temporary period under Article 273. Temporary grants. Article 273. A provision was made for grants in lieu of export duties on jute and jute products to the states of Assam, Bihar, Odisha, and West Bengal. These grants were to be given for a period of 10 years from the commencement of the Constitution. These sums were charged on the Consolidated Fund of India and were made to the states on the recommendation of the Finance Commission. Statutory grants. Article 275. Article 275 empowers the Parliament to make grants to the states which are in need of financial assistance and not to every state. Also, different sums may be fixed for different states. These sums are charged on the Consolidated Fund of India every year. Apart from this general provision, Constitution also provides specific grants for the following two purposes: for promoting the welfare of the scheduled tribes in a state, or for raising the level of administration of the scheduled areas in a state, including the state of Assam. The statutory grants under Article 275, both general and specific, are given to the states on the recommendations of the Finance Commission. Discretionary grants. Article 282. Article 282 empowers both the center and the states to make any grants for any public purpose, even if it is not within their respective legislative competence. Under this provision, the center makes grants to the states. These grants are also known as discretionary grants. The reason being that the center is under no obligation to give these grants and the matter lies within its discretion. These grants have a twofold purpose: one, to help the state financially to fulfill plan targets, and two, to give some leverage to the center to influence and coordinate state action to effectuate the national plan. Notably, the discretionary grants form the larger part of the central grants to states when compared with that of the statutory grants. Borrowing by the Union and the states. Borrowing by the Union. Article 292. The central government can borrow either within India or outside upon the security of the Consolidated Fund of India, or can give guarantees. But in the case of both, it can borrow within the limits fixed by the Parliament. So far, no such law has been enacted by the Parliament. Borrowing by the states. Article 293. Similarly, a state government can borrow within India only and not abroad upon the security of the Consolidated Fund of India, or can give guarantee, but both within it can borrow the limits fixed by the legislature of that state. The central government can make loans to any state or give guarantees in respect of loans raised by any state. Any sums required for the purpose of making such loans are to be charged on the Consolidated Fund of India. A state cannot raise any loan without the consent of the center if there is still outstanding any part of a loan made to the state by the center or in respect of which a guarantee has been given by the center. Intergovernmental tax immunities. Exemption of central property from state taxation. Article 285. Exemption of state property or income from central taxation. Article 289. During the emergency on financial relations, the central state financial relations in normal times described above undergo changes during the emergencies, national and financial. These are as follows. During the national emergency, that is Article 352, while the proclamation of national emergency is in operation, the President can modify the constitutional distribution of revenues between the center and the states. This means that the President can either reduce or cancel the transfer of finances, both tax sharing and grants in aid from the center to the states. Such modification continues till the end of financial year in which the emergency ceases to operate. Financial emergency, Article 360. While the proclamation of financial emergency is in operation, the center can give directions to the states to observe the specified canons of financial propriety, to reduce the salaries and allowances of all class of persons serving in the state, including the High Court judges, and to reserve all money bills and other financial bills for the consideration of the president. Interstate relations, included in Part 11 relations between the Union and the states under administrative relations, and Part 13 trade, commerce, and intercourse within the territory of India. Introduction. Along with the provisions for the center-state relations, the Constitution makes the following provisions with regard to interstate comity: mutual recognition of public acts, records, and judicial proceedings, adjudication of interstate water disputes, coordination through interstate councils, freedom of interstate trade, commerce, and intercourse. In addition, the zonal councils have been established by the Parliament to promote interstate cooperation and coordination. Interstate administrative relations. Article 261. Public acts, records, and judicial proceedings. Article 262. Adjudication of disputes relating to waters of interstate rivers or river valleys. Article 263. Provisions with respect to an interstate council. Interstate water disputes. Article 262. Article 262 of the Constitution provides for the adjudication of interstate water disputes. It makes the following two provisions. Parliament may, by law, provide for the adjudication of any dispute or compliance with respect to the use, distribution, and control of waters of any interstate river and river valley. Parliament may also provide that neither the Supreme Court nor any other court is to exercise jurisdiction in respect of any such dispute or complaint. Why is it out of Supreme Court's jurisdiction? The need and scope as well for an extrajudicial machinery water tribunal to settle interstate water disputes is envisaged in the Constitution, because the Supreme Court would indeed have jurisdiction on to decide any dispute between states in connection with water supplies if legal rights or interests are concerned, but the experience of most countries has shown the other side. Parliamentary Acts for Water Disputes. Under this provision, the Parliament has enacted two laws: the River Boards Act 1956 and Interstate Water Disputes Act 1956. Interstate River Water Dispute Tribunals. As of July 2019, there are currently five existing interstate river water disputes tribunals constituted under the Interstate River Water Disputes Act 1956, Ravi and Bias Water Tribunal, Vasundhara Water Dispute Tribunal, Mahadai Water Disputes Tribunal, Mahanadi Water Disputes Tribunal, and Krishna Water Disputes Tribunal. Kaveri Water Dispute Tribunal has been dissolved in July 2018. Interstate River Water Disputes Amendment Bill 2017. In order to further streamline the adjudication of interstate river water disputes, the Interstate River Water Disputes Amendment Bill 2017 was introduced in the Lok Sabha by the Minister of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation in March 2017. The bill aims to amending the existing Act 1956. The bill envisages to constitute a standalone tribunal with permanent establishment and permanent office space and infrastructure. Coordination between the states through interstate councils. The Sarkaria Commission on the Center-State Relations 1983-87 made a strong case for the establishment of a permanent interstate council under Article 263 of the Constitution. It recommended that in order to differentiate the interstate council from other bodies established under the same Article 263, it must be called as the Intergovernmental Council. Article 263 contemplates the establishment of an interstate council to effect coordination between the states and between center and states. Thus, the President can establish such a council if at any time it appears to him that the public interest would be served by its establishment. He can define the nature of duties to be performed by such a council and its organization and procedure. Even though the President is empowered to define the duties of an interstate council, Article 263 specifies the duties that can be assigned to it in the following manner. 1. Inquiring into and advising upon disputes which may arise between the states. 2. Investigating and discussing subjects in which the states or the center and the states have a common interest. And 3. Making recommendations upon any such subject, and particularly for the better coordination of policy and action on it. The Council's function to inquire and advise upon interstate disputes is complementary to the Supreme Court's jurisdiction under Article 131 to decide a legal controversy between the governments. The council can deal with any controversy, whether legal or non legal, but its function is advisory, unlike that of the court, which gives a binding decision. In pursuance of the recommendations of the Sarkaria Commission, the Janata Dal government, headed by VP Singh, established the Interstate Council in 1990. It consists of the following members: Prime Minister as the chairman, Chief Ministers of all states, Chief Ministers of UTs having legislative assemblies, administrators of the UTs not having legislative assemblies, governors of states under President's rule, six central cabinet ministers, five ministers of cabinet rank, Minister of State, Interstate Trade and Commerce. Article 301 Freedom of Trade, Commerce and Intercourse. Article 302 Power of the Parliament to impose restrictions on trade, commerce and intercourse. Article 303 Restrictions on the legislative powers of the Union and of the states with regard to trade and commerce. Article 304 Registrations on trade, commerce and intercourse among the states. Article 305 Saving of existing laws and laws providing for state monopolies. 306 was repealed. Article 307 Appointment of authority for carrying out the purposes of Articles 301 to 304. Extra constitutional devices. In addition to the above mentioned constitutional devices, there are extra constitutional devices to promote cooperation and coordination between the center and the states. These include a number of advisory bodies and conferences held at the central level. The non constitutional advisory bodies include Niti Aayog, Zonal Councils, Northeastern Council, National Integration Council, University Grants Commission, and so on. The important conferences held either annually or otherwise to facilitate the center-state consultation on a wide range of matters are as follows: the Governors' Conference presided over by the President, the Chief Ministers' Conference presided over by the PM, the Home Ministers' Conference presided over by the Union Home Minister, the Law Ministers' Conference presided over by the Union Law Minister, the Chief Secretary's Conference presided over by the Cabinet Secretary. The Chief Justice's Conference presided over by the Chief Justice of India, the Conference of Inspector General of Police, the Conference of Vice Chancellors, committees and commissions related to the center-state relations. 1966 Administrative Reforms Commission, 1969 Rajamannar Committee, 1973 Anandpur Sahib Resolution, Article 9, the Committee of 1977, West Bengal Memorandum, 1983 Sarkaria Commission, 2007 Punchi Commission. Issues and of conflicts between the Union and the states, mode of appointment and dismissal of governor, discriminatory and partisan role of governors, imposition of president's rule for parties and interests, deployment of central forces in the states to maintain law and order, reservation of state bills for the consideration of presidents. Discrimination in financial allocations to the states, encroachment with the center or on the state list, management of all India services, use of electronic media for political purposes, appointment of inquiry commissions against the chief ministers, sharing of finances between the center and states, and so on.